Thank you. Yes, so I'm going to talk a little bit more conceptually than all the technical details per se. I think most of the things I'm going to show are going to be published. I will be published very soon, and the code will be available, and it's probably easier to get the details there than here. So it's more about how I think we should work with information flow and AI rather than all the technical details of implementation. So basically, the background for my presentation is the way I think about the way we collect data, and I think that everything that moves in the forest should be looked upon as a source of information. To do that, we have to organize the data collection, and we convert the data we capture into information in the decisions form. And that's, in say, the core of what we try to do. And the other aspect I think that's important is that AI is not a new thing for forestry, right? In forest inventory, let's say random forest and all these things have been used for many years, and I think you're hard pressed to find remote sensing paper these days that does not use some kind of machine learning. Satellite-based remote sensing, it's all machine learning. So I guess the point is that what we do see when we look across this, what we can call the chain of productivity and the chain of producing timber in the forest, is that the technology development has been very different at the different stages of development. So there's been a lot of focus on forest inventory, remote sensing, AI. In silviculture, for example, we've had a lot less. That means that the information that's generated in inventory really does not get used in silviculture. Then we have the forest operations. They don't necessarily talk to the inventory people, and they don't necessarily talk to the silviculturalists. So what happens is that the whole information flow stops, and we actually don't realize the gains that we can get from technology. And at the end, we have the mills, and we have all kind of advanced mills that do timber quality measurements, but it's never really linked in large scale to inventory, to silviculture, or to operations. And I think that's what we have to do if we really have to realize some of the gains that are inherent in both technology and AI. So I'm just going to try to see some of this and show some of the examples that we work with. So of course, first, inventory. There's lots of applications. Drones and AI, I think, is one of these things that there's an enormous amount of papers coming out on how to use AI and different types of algorithms to analyze drone imagery. We also done that, but I'd like to say that drones per se are not special. The sensors that are on drones are the same that are on planes or per se on satellites. You have slightly different properties of the data, but in principle the same. The difference is the way of application, because drones are a decentralized system. That means that you decentralize the collection of data, and you allow us to collect data at a time when you need it, not when the plane is taking off in half a year or when the next satellite comes over that view and you have no clouds. So that's the special thing about drones. So one of the things that of course happens is forest damage. One of the things that happens in places like Norway is that we get wet snow and trees break. So the only way to go out to the forest and find these today is the forest insurance company. They send out their people, they walk through the forest in deep snow and try to find out where the trees are broken. So they would like an easy way to do this, so they want to fly with drones and they want to detect where the broken trees and basically find a way to make their workflow more efficient. And this is just an image of what healthy and broken and dead trees look like from a drone. So what we did is basically fit a model that detects the individual trees in these drone images and classify them to healthy, the species, and whether or not they're broken from snow. But I think the key point here is not fitting the model. This is a YOLO. It's a very simple image bounding box detector. It's very easy to fit. And if you ever follow anything about this on social media, you'll have seen lots of things, people fitting YOLOs to detect everything from, basically everything. but I think the key aspect is that if you go out and fit this to just image acquisition from a couple of sites, and you try to apply this model to drone imagery you capture the next week, it's not going to work at all. Because what's going to happen is that you have a tremendous variability in the lighting conditions, whether or not the sun angle, snow, not snow, God knows. Like, the variability that you have to cover is extremely large. So you have to create relatively large training data sets to get good predictions. Because really what you want to go to is you want to go to a system where you do not have to make field work on every site you go and use the drone, because that's when it gets efficient for the people using it. So what we did is we collected drone data across a whole year, different times of day, different sun angles, winter, summer, snow, non-snow. And then we manually annotated about 41,000 trees. That's a lot of work, but it's basically what you need to do to get these things working, because it is about getting big data sets that cover the variabilities to do this. And what you get then is something like this, classification of snow-broken trees, healthy trees. You can see the precision and recall there. Of course, it's not perfect, and that's of course on independent data. So it's not perfect at all. But you know, for the guy who actually has to walk through the forest, otherwise, this provides a great decision support system that at least tells them where they should go and look for broken trees rather than just walk through the whole forest looking for them. And I think that's part of it. It's not like AI is supposed to necessarily replace people in the forest. It's basically to last and make their lives easier. So that's I think it's one way to look at it. Another way, this is exactly the same. It's also with drone data. This is post-harvest assessment. You know, we have certification rules that says how much soil disturbance you have to have after a cut. You have rules that says how many trees you have to leave within the clear cut to comply with certification schemes. The state forest wants to make audits of all their cuts to make sure that they're within this. And walking through all these clear cuts, looking at all this takes a tremendous amount of time. So they want to fly with it, they want to detect the clear cuts, and they want to detect the trees that are left within the site, so they can update their inventories. And I have to say this real rock detection algorithm performs quite poorly, quite disappointing. We worked on it for many, many years, and this is the best we can do, so I hope somebody else will make a better one, but you can see it in the paper if you want. If you have an idea and you want the data, you should contact me, so I'll be very happy to see somebody else doing it better. But really, you can say these previous examples were examples of how you can improve existing workflows using drones and relatively simple algorithms. But really, other types of data has the opportunity to not just improve existing things we do, but to actually make it possible to measure new things, improve things we do. And I think that high-resolution 3D point clouds are one of those options. It doesn't necessarily replace what we were doing before, but it gives us new opportunities. It gives us new opportunities to characterize, for example, crown, branching, all these things that we always wanted to have when we developed growth and linear models, when we looked at quality and all these things, but were practically almost impossible to do in the field. So it's a little bit interesting that the majority of the studies that look at point clouds, they try to recreate diameter measurements, when the only thing that's not interesting to look at in these 3D point clouds is diameter measurements, because it's so efficient to do with a caliber. But basically, I think there are two main challenges when we look at these point clouds, and it's what's called instance. Here it's annotation. Annotation is when it's done manually, segmentation is when it's done automatically. It's the instance segmentation annotation, that means identifying the individual tree. The second is the semantic, which means basically identifying the different components of the point clouds. Is it a branch? Is it a stem? Is it ground? Is it vegetation? Is it step? Whatever it is. And basically, this is a challenge that we've been working on for many, many years to do this. And basically, my point is that I think AI really provides an avenue for making this much better than what we've done before. But really, to get there, we need to have good data sets. And that's where we lack today. Because if you look at the fields that are way ahead of us in these kind of things, autonomous cars and all this, they have lots and lots of benchmarking data sets. And then they're basically used to test all the new algorithms, and they've been used to develop them all. In forestry, how many benchmarking data sets do we have for point clouds? I don't know, very many at least. But we should have those, because that's really what's going to both be able to benchmark the different systems being developed, but also to develop them. And it's also going to make it available for a lot more people to contribute to the development of these tools. Because basically, the access to these types of data are really limiting people's progress. It's not realistic that an individual PhD student sitting somewhere would be able to create these data sets by themselves. So we have to collectively create them in some way. So just one example of that. We've been trying to work on this, and these data sets will be publicly released very soon as benchmarking data sets. That means we have predetermined what is the training data, what is the test data, and what is the validation data. And basically this, for instance, data set, that's basically means that it's manually annotated. So we taking the point clouds, we go into cloud compare, and we've had some poor souls sitting there, finding out what's the individual tree, what is a branch, what is a dead wood, what is all these things. And you can argue that something good came out of the corona issue because we had a lot of people who didn't know what to do with, so they could do this instead because they were not allowed to leave their houses. But I think something like this will give us an opportunity to test the different approaches, and then also give us an opportunity to really promote this, the use of these point clouds. Similarly, here is a benchmarking data set that we're currently developing also, which is has actually 20,000 individual point clouds from across Europe. It's basically partly part of the smart forest, but also partly part of this cost action. And what it has is 33 species with more than 50 trees. That's an enormous data set compared to anything we've seen before. And this, for let's say, for developing tree species classification models, or I don't know what that is. This will be a very strong data set that hopefully works. If somebody sits with a very good way of doing this, and we do have a data challenge where people submit into a scoreboard and we evaluate the models, but otherwise the data set will be publicly and free available very soon as well. But what can we do with those kind of things? Of course, yesterday we saw this FSCT hands-on session, which basically takes point clouds, right, and semantic and instance segmented. We have made a similar framework. It's called point to tree. And the difference to FSCT is that this is a modular system, so basically we can take any semantic segmentation, combine it with any other different instance segmentation, and we have a hyperparameter tuning thing that actually tunes the hyperparameters. What we see is we have slightly different semantic classes in the FSCT. They use branches as part of the stem. We don't use branches as part of the stem, which makes it a lot easier to identify the individual trees than if you have branches and stem in the same semantic class. So what you see on the, I don't know where you see that. Yeah, you see over here, this is an example of how well this is done on instance segmentation on a completely independent data set from Austria. And what you see here in the blue is the manual segmented point cloud from Austria. This is the predicted segmentation, and of course the red here is the difference. But this is pretty impressive. I think this is of course one of the better trees. But what it means is that once we start getting these kind of models, we can make annotation much, much faster, because now you can start predicting on point clouds that could be like, and then you correct them. You don't have to do all the annotation from the bottom up in cloud compare. And that's the way we can start building even larger data set for training these things. I think. But another thing is that, okay, the 3D point clouds, they are dramatically difficult to work with. They're very computationally intensive, they're heavy, they're difficult. So one thing that's coming out now is that it's quite an easy way an efficient way is to take a 2D image of a 3D point cloud. And then you use 2D, there's so many methods for analyzing images in 2D, right? It's a very mature field of segmentation and of detection. So if you convert the 3D point cloud to 2D images, then you can use, for example, the YOLO or any other detection method that you use in 2D images. So here is an example that takes the segmented trees, then takes images, 2D images from 6 sides. Then you train a YOLO model to take all the whorls on spruce trees, so right, we grow 1 whorl per year, and then per se get the height trajectory of the individual trees from one measurement. Of course, there's mistakes in this, so we don't have enough training data because these models the trees were destructively sampled to get the true, so there's a limit to how many trees there can do. But the potential is there. But that was the forest inventory, and now we have to go fast through the other things because time is flying. But silviculture, the point is that really we have to make sure that the information that comes on from all these methods gets taken into the silviculture to improve the silviculture. So this is one example here. Here we basically use the laser point clouds to get better site index information. At the same time, we collect the information from the harvester, specifically about root rot. Root rot is a disease that spreads through the roots of spruce trees in Norway. It destroys about 20% of the spruce bud logs, which is a very high value. So basically you don't want to plant close to that. So what you can do, well, basically we have a machine learning approach that also detects these stumps from the harvester data, but it's not here. But basically what you can then do is you move towards sub-stand level management rather than stand level management. And if you do this, what we can show in simulation is that you actually improve your economic gains from these stands in 95% of the stands if you collect this data. And this data is basically freely available already. But the other thing, of course, when you do something like that, you have to be able to implement this. So this is a planting device. This is how you normally plant trees in Norway. It is GPS enabled, fully differential GPS, so precision of some centimeters. There's an iPhone that basically, phone connected to it that basically tells you what you should do, where we are, what tree species you should plant. So you can follow up these precision systems. And what it of course also gives you, it gives you the exact position of all the seedlings that you have. And then, if you after a couple of years fly over with your drone, hopefully you can count your seedlings to start looking at survival, performance, based on where your seedlings were planted, when they were planted, and you can actually also so it gives a completely different way of following up the success of silviculture treatments. Yes. And I wouldn't do it in a video normally, but it's nice in the presentation. But that was silviculture. So then we go to harvesting, and harvesting is very interesting. So we do fully mechanized harvesting everywhere. We can't do any manual harvesting, and these harvesters really are a wonderful source of information. Right? They measure all the trees. They measure them every 10 centimeters in diameter, all the trees. One harvester costs about 30,000 cubic meters per year, so it's a lot of trees per harvester, right? A lot of trees and a lot of information. But what we have here is a bit of special equipment. It's basically the same as an autonomous car, so it has 2 laser scanners, has differential GPS, IMU, and edge computing. So what we can do is that while we drive, we can also generate a point cloud, just like GeoSLAM, from the harvester. What we can also do, and this is a little bit interesting because this is also about how you apply AI. So this is basically the 2 laser scanners. Rather than treating them as point clouds, generating the SLAM point cloud, you convert them live to 2D images, depth images. Then on the edge, you actually perform the classification, so you can classify both the trees around the harvester and the exact position of the harvester head. That means, per se, if you have a good individual inventory, tree inventory, and you want to say, okay, I want to harvest these trees, you actually know which trees you're harvesting when you're there with the machine, right? Because that's a limiting thing today. Is we do all this with individual tree inventories, and And then comes along the harvester and just makes random choices, right? So there's a complete disconnect, and we really have to tie that together to be able to take the benefits of these things. And of course, it can also provide decision support for the driver, because this can calculate the basal area around the machine at the current time. So if you want to do a thinning to a given target, you can actually see how much basal area you're taking out and how much you need. But of course, you also have to transport your timber on the roads afterwards. Most of these trucks, they drive with dash cams in their windshield already, because they want to make sure that if they collide with something, they have that recorded. But you also want to monitor the road conditions. So this here again is a simple annotated model that detects potholes in the road to create a map of maintenance needs for the forest companies. Of course, we have to say that this is not perfect, and the reason is that the number of potholes that you actually will see will depend on a lot of weather conditions, right? If you have a lot of water in all your potholes, you will detect way more than if you have a low sun angle and you don't really see the road as well. But on the same time, you will drive across this road multiple times. So you get a lot of data from the same road for free, because these dash cams are already there. So the basic flow of that idea is, of course, that you take these dash cam videos, they have embedded GNSS signals, and then you basically snap them to the road information, for example, from OpenStreetMap or whatever road layer you have. You run well, you have to train your pothole detector, of course, but you apply that. And then the idea is that you get this decision support tool, so this basically maintenance need map for your road network, through just using the infrastructure that we already have moving in the forest. Yes. And then to the wood supply, and I promise I have to be brief now, but I think this is one of the more exciting areas, but it requires a lot of infrastructure. Because really what we want to ultimately do is we want to connect wood quality to management. We want to connect it to where it grew, how we treated the trees, to the lasers data that we have from those trees. But if we have the exact coordinates of each harvested tree, we actually have a system here below here, what you see here. It's a system that is basically installed on this harvest, and what it does is it prints a unique number on each stem that this harvest is cutting. What we then have is a camera solution at the mill that recognizes that number, meaning that we can tie that to the X-ray that the mill has, right? Because the mill has a 3D X-ray of all the logs with nodiness, density, all these variables that we want to know. That means that we can start connecting all the treatments and make predictive models that try to predict wood quality at a much earlier stage in the value chain than what we're doing now, because today we actually just know the wood quality once it gets into the mill, but we really should know it much before, so we could send the right wood to the right mills and the right products to optimize what we do. But of course, first you have to get the infrastructure running to get this data, and the idea is to get a lot of data, not just 20 trees, but like 200,000 trees to make a model. But with harvests, that's completely realistic, because they harvest maybe 50,000 trees a year. And then finally, of course, we come to this with the whole, how do we actually make this use of these things? And I guess a lot of the people here, they would like to see GitHub accounts and all these kind of things in available code, but the majority of forest researchers, they don't want to see GitHub. They don't care about it. They can't download anything there. And the majority of managers, they certainly cannot do that either. They just want to apply it And they actually want to have it directly into the systems that they use, then I want to learn to use a new system. So what we built is we built a cloud-based system where data is either automatically uploaded, then the algorithms are applied, the results are sent back to the people who submitted via VMS, VMS and BFS layers, because then you can use them directly into their existing management systems. Like VMS and BFS is what everybody uses in let's say, anybody who uses GIS-based programs, which is almost everybody in forest management. You can also just upload your images. If anybody wants to try, basically all the examples that I showed here, we have integrated here, so you can try them without downloading the code. The code, of course, will also in time be available, but this is a much lower threshold access. Yes, and I think that was it for today. Thank you.